Hey guys, Bound to Divide here with Abletontips, and today we're going to be making a loop from scratch, and we're going to do it in the style of more like modern breakbeats. Think Franky or Bicep or somebody like that. Okay, so I'm going to start off by setting my project to 124 BPM, and then I'm just going to highlight, let's do 8 bars here on this first MIDI channel. Control M, and the first thing I'm going to be making is a drone sound. That's basically how I start all of my projects. So let's go here to instruments, and we're going to grab wavetable, and we're going to set this first oscillator to a saw, second one to a saw 2. And we're going to be putting a note down at D because I want to work in D minor today. So let's go to D3 and we'll just extend that note out. And if I loop this, it should now sound very loud, but we're going to fix that. Let's add a little bit of unison to it. We're going to let's use this noise unison so it gets a little bit of grit into the sound, just makes it a bit more interesting. And then we're also going to take this filter and just bring the filter down. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. We can also add a little bit of movement to it. So let's just add an LFO to the filter frequency. Move that up a little bit. Less. I just want very slight amounts of movement. We could even bring down the amount here. And then we can go to this LFO and we can slow down the rate. Okay, so that's now got a bit of movement to it, and let's now take a reverb. I'm just going to use a really long reverb, so can take out some of the low end by enabling the low cut. We're just going to filter this down to basically the mid-range, and the same thing on this diffusion network. We're going to take out the low end, make sure that there's no low end in that tail, and some of the high end, so we get this nice dark reverb. And let's make the time really long and the size really big. I don't want too much modulation in the reverb, so I'm just going to bring down the chorus and the spin. And just set this to high quality. Bring up the dry wet. I think it sounds nice there. Okay, so that's our drone. Next up, we're going to be making a melody, and we're going to make sort of like an arpeggio kind of melody. And for this, we're going to be using wavetable. Let's just name this our arpeggio. I'm just going to highlight 4 bars here. Okay, so we want to make sort of like a plucky kind of saw wave shape. So for the first oscillator, we're going to be using a saw wave, but I'm going to kind of shift it up a bit so it's not complete saw. And I'm just going to be adjusting the sound here. And I'm just going to lay down a few notes so that we can set up our sound. Okay, so the melody is going to start on an F here, and then we go down to an A. And then we go up here. Ding, 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 ding. Ding. Yeah, so then it basically just repeats this. And I'm gonna quickly design the sound now because this is really like harsh on the ears. So the second oscillator, we're gonna be using a sine wave, and we're gonna bring down this filter frequency a bit. Okay, and we're going to be using unison noise here. And that immediately gives us this like really nice, gritty, interesting sound. I love this unison noise feature over here. Okay, then let's just shape our envelope. So the amp envelope, we're going to make it a bit more plucky. So we're going to bring it down to around 200 milliseconds decay and about -18. And sustain, and we want some release in it, so let's give it like a 2.2 millisecond. Let's give it about a 2-second release. You can hear that release almost sounds like a reverb tail. And then we're going to go into envelope 2, and the envelope 2 is going to be modulating this frequency. cut off. So this, we're going to make it a little bit more plucky too. We're going to bring it down to around 500 milliseconds. And the sustain I'm going to bring down to around 30 milliseconds. And then we just need to assign this to the frequency here. And then we're going to make the sound a little more plucky by using envelope 3 with like a really short decay. Let's bring it down to around 20 milliseconds, 19-20 milliseconds. And we can assign that to the pitch, but just a very slight amount. You can hear it gets like really harsh when you bring this up. And what it's doing is basically creating this very fast pitch sweep and giving us a nice attack. I think around there is fine. Okay, so let's get back into this melody. I don't want to just repeat it over and over again. We want to have some sort of variation. So at the end of that phrase, we can have 2 notes that do something different. So we have it going up here and then down here. So we're going up to the F and then back down to the C. Okay, so let's do this movement right at the end here. So we're going to bring this down here and then... Okay, so let's bring this whole sequence down 1 octave. Okay, now I want to add a little bit more interest to this pluck by using an LFO on the pitch. So let's use LFO 1 and we're going to modulate that slightly. At the moment it sounds really drastic. And what I want to do is just turn off retrigger because I don't want the LFO to restart every time a new note starts. So it'll constantly be shifting up and down. And now if we speed it up and turn it almost into like a vibrato, then we can just bring down the amount. And we can give it a little bit of a tack so that this LFO takes a second to, or a few milliseconds to fade in, and we don't hear the wobble right at the start of the note. It's kind of only in the tail. Okay, and we're going to make a little bit of a variation here, so it feels a little bit stale with this pattern just repeating exactly the same way, and we can change that by shifting these 2 notes forward a bit, let's say to there. And these ones forward. Okay, and then next thing I'm going to be making is the bass. So now that we've got the melody, it's a lot easier to write a bass line because we have some context and we can hear which bass notes feel right. Okay, so the bass line is going to have 2 layers and they're both going to be wavetable. We're going to be using one of them to create like a mid-range bass, which is going to be like a classic kind of old school garage Reese bass, and then a nice clean sub because the Reese bass is quite phasey. So I'd like to have a sub that's pretty solid. So let's create this Reese bass first, and for that we're just going to use 2 saw waves and we're going to detune them from each other. So let's put this one up 20 cents and this one down more or less 20 cents. And we want to make this nice and sustained. So now we can, let's actually make this length here 4 bars. And now we can put some notes in and the bass line is going to go D. Let's just shift this down into the bass octave. And I'm also going to turn down this wavetable while we do this. And I'm going to hold this note out for quite a while here. Okay, we're going to make this pattern 8 bars. And we're going to go down to the A sharp or the B flat. So we're going D down to B flat. And then we're going up to the C. And then back down to the G. And I'm going to start filtering this sound here because it's got a whole bunch of low end and a whole bunch of high end that I don't actually want in there. So we're going to take out a bunch of the high end and the low end. And I'm going to use I normally advise against using these really steep curves, but in this case I really want to make space for a clean sub. So I'm going to use the steep curve and chop it off right around 100 Hertz. You might want to actually boost this a little bit like that. So now if we listen to these together, yeah, that sounds good to me. So now I'm just going to duplicate this and we're going to make our sub. We don't need this EQ for our sub because the sub's just going to be pretty much a clean saw wave. So I'm going to turn off oscillator 2. We're only using oscillator 1. I'm going to take off the detune, and then I'm just going to filter it down to around 100 Hertz or so. And now we've just got this clean sub, not phasing or anything like that Reese. You can see it here. Yep, that looks good. Okay, and then let's just get back to this arpeggio because I forgot to put my delay and reverb onto it. So we're going to take some delay, and I also want to make this a little... Okay, so making that a little more plucky, and then we are unlinking these and we're setting this one to 2 and this one to 3. We're going to bring the dry wet down to 40% and this up to 77%. And then we're just going to filter this delay a bit. And then afterwards, we're going to put a reverb on there. And the reverb is going to be pretty long. So we're going to set this to 35%. And we want the reverb up high around 10, 12 milliseconds. Oh, 12 seconds, sorry. And cut out some of the low end. And we're bringing in some more high end here. We're bringing up the size. And then we're going to filter out some of the low end, some of the high end. I'm going to bring down the scale and the density a bit. And that kind of just changes the texture of the reverb. Take down that spin a little bit too, and then set this dry wet. 30%. And then lastly, we're going to need a little bit of reverb on this sound, a little bit of EQ on the sound. Use some more high end there. Okay, so we kind of have most of the parts done, but what we really need here is some more like harmony in the background, sort of in the back of the mix. So we're going to be making sort of like a tremolo kind of pad, almost like stutters, and add some rhythm as well as harmony to the back of the mix.
Just a quick break before we go back to the tutorial. If you find these type of videos helpful, we can highly recommend the PML Academy with over 35 full-length online courses, spreading over topics like writing chords and melodies or arranging your songs to producing entire songs from start to finish. So check out the link in the description to see what's inside the all courses bundle exactly.
So we're going to make a new channel here, and we're going to be using a couple presets. First one is called Off-World Strings. So if you just search for string, and I think it is pads. Oh, hang on. Just search Off-World Strings, there it is. And then with this, we're going to be making a pattern that's sort of going to be playing something different than the bass, and really just did this by ear. There's no like real music theory as to why I chose the notes. I just liked how they sounded against the bass line. I just felt like they added some nice harmony to it. So if we come over here, we can start placing notes. So here is a note at A. And then we're going to go down, all the way down to the C here. D. Let's increase the reverb here. Okay, so now I want some movement in the sound. I'm going to add an auto pan, and we're just going to have this gently drifting from left to right. Nice and slowly. And then we're going to just search tremolo, and if we go to audio effects, we can go to utilities. Where is it? Auto pan, tremolo here. And we're going to like stutter this, so we want to set it to 16ths and bring up the amount and set it to a saw wave. And let's just grab a utility and turn this up a bit. Okay, we can actually duplicate this whole thing and make this 8 bar, is it 16 bars now? I think 16 bars. And now I want to add another pad that's going to go kind of in the middle here. So let's just add another channel. And for this one, we are going to be using another preset called Celestial Pad. So if you come to instruments here, here it is under operator. And for this one, I'm just basically going to be making a big D minor chord here, which is our first chord in the scale, our tonic. So we need to come up D, and we're going to start actually D2. Okay, and we're just going to hit legato here to extend this note out, and then we're going to just build basically a big D minor chord. So we're inverting it. So normally what a D minor chord looks like is D, F, A. But here we're going to take that F and shift it up 1 octave. Sorry, that's not an inversion, that's just a different voicing. So we're just shifting that middle note up 1 octave, and it should sound like this. So this is just going to come in the last 2 bars and kind of bring us into the next section. Okay, and then I want to add one more sound, and that's going to be also done with wavetable. And we kind of, we're going to make this like growly bass that's going to happen every once in a while. So we just grab wavetable. Okay, so we're going to use 2 saw waves here, and then I'm going to go and just detune them slightly from each other again. And now if I just place down a note, let's say a low D here, play that. What I want to do is just make it kind of growl. So if we make this steep and have this filter in like that, we could even go lower. Let's go down another octave. Yeah, something like this. So we're going to use this amp on, we're going to use an envelope here to make that growl shape. Let's go here to envelope 2, and we're going to make the attack pretty long and the decay around 1 millisecond, I think. And then we're just going to assign it to the frequency here. Okay, something like that. Okay, and then let's add a bit of distortion. So I'm going to add this PRD circuit over here and just increase the drive. And remember, we've got a lot of sub already in the track, so we can take out the sub from this one. And then we can add some nice reverb to just put it in a huge space. So like a really long reverb, really bring up that dry wet, bring up the size. Okay, so I only want this to hit like quite sparsely. So if we just listen to the track. And we just need to follow this bass line. So I'm not going to do this too often, but I'm just going to put it, I think, on the D here and on the C. So let's put it here on the C. And just duplicate that. Okay, and then all that's left really is to build out our drum groove. Okay, so the method I use probably is different from what a lot of other producers recommend, and a lot of what other producers do for breaks is they take a break sample like an Amen break or a Think break, and then they chop it up and take the individual hits and kind of sequence them out in MIDI so that the individual samples aren't affected by Ableton's warping. But in my opinion, I don't like the sound of that. It usually sounds quite like stuttered and artificial, so I simply just warp an entire break sample to the correct BPM, and I'm not too concerned if it sounds like a little bit warped, like you can hear a little bit of the artifacting. I personally don't think most people do. I've been doing this on quite a few breaks tracks and nobody's ever said, hey, it sounds like that sample's been warped. So yeah, this is just the way I do it. I'm going to be using a Think break sample that I found and chopping that one up. So if we just throw this on here, so we need to warp it to 175 here, and then if I play this, yeah, the groove's pretty cool, but I want to go for a more like classic break style where we have the snare landing on the 2 and on the 4. So, and I also don't want to use this kick. Don't like the sound of it. So here we're going to do a little bit of chopping up. So I'm just going to steal a couple of these hits from this section and place it here instead of the kick. And then what I want to do is take this snare and chop it out and shift it forward. But now we've got this gap here, so what I can do is just steal some more of the hats from there. Or maybe what we can do is take out this section and just use this little piece over here. Okay, and then just move that back up there, and let's hear this. So yeah, this is going to be my loop. You can hear there's some clicking, so a quick way to get rid of that is to just crossfade it, and you can do create crossfades on clip edges, or it's Control-Alt-F. And now we should be good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just consolidate this. This is my break sample, and then we can loop it. So we can just come here and hit loop, and then drag it out all the way across. And this is basically just going to be like the support for our break. I'm going to be using the snare from here. I'm going to be adding my own kick drum and some of my own hats. Yeah, and also we're going to do like a crash and stuff. So one thing you might want to try and do is to just tighten up the loop. So if we listen to it in context, you might like it like this, or you might want it a bit tighter, less splashy. So what we can do is just set it to beats mode, set the forward arrow here, and then just drag this down. And now we have a bit of a tighter loop. It's just a bit cleaner. Okay, let's find our kick. So here, I'm going to be using 2 kicks. One's going to be from my pack here, and we're going to be using this one called Vision. And I like this one because it's got a nice strong sub, and the transient's kind of not so artificial, like a more clicky sound like that. Bit more realistic, and because these drums are kind of acoustic sounding, I want to find kick to sort of match that feeling. So I'm just going to double click and place down a MIDI note, and then we're going to double click on this. And we're going to be making a sort of a classic breaks pattern. So we need another kick over here. And then we can just loop this, but that's a little bit boring. So what I want to do is add like a few ghost kicks in there. So let's actually make this loop. Let's make it 4 bars long, and then we can draw our own pattern in. So I can duplicate this out, and then I want to start placing some ghost notes. So on the first one, let's do a little bit of a hit here in the last 16th note. And I'm adjusting the velocity because I don't want the ghost note to be as loud as the main kick. I'll do another 16th over here. And on this one, I'm going to place a note, a ghost kick, a little bit louder and on the second 16th note here, so that it creates this kind of like bounce on the last bar of this pattern. Okay, so this kick still needs a little bit of work, and I'm going to layer it with another kick, and that's from D Premium 5, and it is called 18 PML DPV 5. So we go to D Premium 5 here, go to kicks. It's this one, the MISC one. So I'm going to duplicate this pattern and just double click on this kick. So reason why I chose this is it feels a bit more acoustic. I guess the transient and the tail is got like this nice noise in it. And so I'm going to layer it with this kick. And what I'm going to do is just EQ the low end from this one out. But not completely. I still want like the mid-range from it. Just basically getting rid of the sub. And then on this one, I'm going to make a little bit of space for the transient, the high end at least, of this kick. And then just balance them. I think that sounds good. Okay, so they're not really cutting through the mix, and that's because we haven't side-chained anything to them. And I'm going to go for a bit more of a classic style of side-chaining here, where we're just going to be ducking everything around the kick instead of individual elements. I think that just it sounds cool in breaks. So grab a compressor, and so we are side-chaining to 12 group here, which is the kick. I'm just going to take out some of the low ends so that we have a nice sharp side chain. Increase the release a bit. Okay, and then we're going to add a hat, and I want to go for like a classic kind of like 909 style hat. Let's just go back to D Premium, and the hat we're going to be using is called Open 7. So we go to hats here, we go to Open 7, this one. And I'm just going to click that in, put a note at C3 here, and another one over there, and we can just loop this all the way across and just mix it in until it sounds right. Okay, then we just need our crash. It's the last thing, and we're using crash 7. Let's just drop crash 7 here in the timeline. And I want to make this sound a little bit more interesting. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually pitch it down because it's a bit bright. And then I'm going to add a delay to really like widen and get it to splash around. We're going to set it to 1 over here and have a really high feedback and ping pong it. And then I'm going to add a reverb to it. Also a nice long reverb with some high end in it and big size. And another thing I want to do is just to make it a bit more interesting is add a flanger to it, so we can click on phaser flanger and then just click on flanger and put it before the reverb, and then you get this kind of something a bit more interesting than just a plain old crash. But what we can do is just bring down the amount so that it doesn't go too high. And then we have a bit more of an interesting crash, and we can also place that into the sidechain group. And there's our loop. Okay, so if you enjoyed that, consider checking out some of our courses. We have a bunch of start to finish courses, some of them instructed by myself. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.